The first rule in grip sport is you tell everyone about grip sport.
Crushing, pinch grip, thick bar, wrists.
If the best guy in the world can't lift 100 pounds on it, I don't give a shit about it.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Grip Show. Now, this is a guest a lot of you have been requesting in the past. I've been waiting myself to get a chance to interview him. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to do my best. Ivan Shook, is that right?
Pretty close, yeah.
Close? How bad was I off?
I mean, the correct pronunciation is Ivan Chuk. So
Okay.
you're like,
so Chuk is more like that. Yeah. Okay. I just got to throw that out there because, man, every time I talk to somebody, they'll be like, Ivan. And I'm like, yeah. And I get in the habit of almost doing it myself. So wanted to just kind of like start out the gate and at least, give a shot at the name and let everybody know how it's said. But yeah, man. So yeah, we got Ivan here, man. And we were speaking before this, but we kind of, I don't want to say found out about the sport, but kind of started the sport roughly at the same time, about 4 years ago, maybe. What was kind of your intro into the sport, or what was like the first thing you kind of picked up on that got you going?
Oh, the first thing I picked up on was grippers, and it was mainly from videos on YouTube from Jujimufu. And I saw some videos with him and Brian Shaw and Jed Johnson and Larry Wheels, and I was like, And I see all these guys doing these like Captain the Crush grippers. I might buy one. Eventually I did, and that was my first kind of introduction per se.
And man, when you got these grippers, like, did you just straight up, did you like just slam a number 3 and not even realize what you were doing, or what was that like first time out?
No, I bought a 1.5 first time. I saw one of the guys that used to film with Juji, Tom, and I saw that he couldn't close a 1. And I was 16 at the time. I was like, okay, if he can't close a 1, but he's getting close to it, I should be able to close a 1.5. Like, there's no way my grip is weaker than this guy's, And I tried it, and I closed the 1.5 first try, but it wasn't easy. So it was like, just like barely getting it kind of thing. And I've done it kind of greasing the groove with it for a couple weeks, where I would wake up, close it, go to school, come back, close it. And then before bed, which usually before bed was when I had the best feeling, because before you go to bed, your hands kind of swell up a little bit because of the water retention and everything. And so your hands are a little bit warmer. So it feels easier to close a gripper if you're not actually warming up. If you just go up and you grab it and you take it. So, yeah.
All right, man. So yeah, that, like I said, that's kind of interesting. I think, I don't know if grippers was the first thing that I really got into. I would see like some of the competition stuff, because I saw a lot of Jed videos and stuff too. But I want to say I was probably about the same range when I started with grippers. I just didn't go on the like insane route that you did, where you over the couple of years, man, you just turned into a monster on them. I was going to mention, man, that's one thing just out the gate that I've always found cool about you, is because for anybody that's not aware, Ivan's 22 years old right now. So like when he's talking about closing these grippers as a teenager and stuff, we were seeing him do these insane closes, very high level grippers. And you know what I mean? It's hard to almost believe when it's like, man, it's almost like a kid doing it, at some point. But in the online world, a lot of people will fake or do different things. So the one thing that I always have liked about you is the fact that like everything's been real. Everything's been, kind of through hard training. And even I think when Jed kind of popped up at the Arnold, it might've been the first one I went to. It's like, hey, can you just close this 3.5? And you're like, yeah. And you're just like, boom. And you close it on the spot. So like, I don't know. You know what I mean? I just kind of like the fact that you've always been like walking the walk whereas some of these people are like, well, I'm not going to close that, or, well, I can only do it at this time. And you're just like the real deal. So,
Yeah, that was one of the things that at that time I knew that what I was doing wasn't, you know, wasn't as normal as, as I thought it was, but I wanted to show people, if I go and I get a chance to show people even at the local gym or something like that, friends of mine that were in arm wrestling and grip training and stuff, and over the years they would try the 3.5, they try to close it, and then they'll just close it in front of them, and it's just kind of cool. I mean, at that point, it's almost more like a magic trick,
yeah.
right? But it's like a real trick. It's not like it's swapping the gripper in front of them and sneak it. But yeah, it was cool. Like I wanted to do that in front of Judd because he was one of the first people that got me in the grip. So I felt like I had to give back to some degree. And yeah.
Well, man, hey, I think it's cool. And like I said, I think other people appreciate just being open and authentic about it. And then because especially with grippers, I'm not going to say that people don't do it with other stuff, but we've seen a lot of stuff with grippers where there's like this over the years, whether it's grip board or YouTube, different places, everybody, there's that Captains of Crush mystique, the 3, the 3.5, the number 4. And you'll see these guys that will be closing them. And then we're not really sure, are they legit? Who's a witness? What's happening? And then next thing you know, they kind of fade off and you don't hear about them. And you're like, well, what happened to that guy? Or, so there's a lot of weird stuff that goes on with grippers sometimes online. And even in the last couple of years, we've seen probably, I don't want to say some of the more bizarre stuff with grippers, but we've seen some interesting stuff with grippers and certifications the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, even in the sense of when more people come into the sport, you get more of these, I mean, we'd like to think of it like everybody, right? Because it's how it's perceived online, but in reality, it's a very small percentage of the grip population. So if you have 1 or 2 guys who are tricking everybody and fooling the certifications and everything, well, they're kind of setting an example, like this is what you can get away with.
Yeah.
And, it's important to call that out, and it's important to try to, as quickly as you can, to try and get to the bottom of it and try to expose that, because you don't want that flying around in the community, because then people's perceptions will change. If you see a guy who weighs 140 pounds who is credit card closing a number 4, the same rating as the one that Carl did, and Carl's triple his size, then how does that make Carl look? You know what I mean? So yeah. it changes the perception, and that can mess with people's heads a little bit.
I agree, man. And what's funny about that is in the instance I believe the one you're referring to, the thing that always killed me with that was just how easy the sets were, just setting the gripper.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you watch Carl close it, and I mean, he's jacked up. He's like almost shaking. It's shaking, like, I mean, like
he's getting it 110%. Yeah.
And you can see it, you can see the effort. And then you got somebody, like you said, like a third the size, and they're like, oh yeah, it's easy to set. And you're like, something's not right, that's the thing that always stood out to me. Because like I said, I'm no gripper expert at all, but I've at least put some heavy grippers in my hands and tried setting them. And it usually doesn't look like that, No. So, yeah, some funny stuff, but yeah, I agree, man. You got to really, for all lifts, not just grippers. I think that just trying to maintain the integrity of the sport with it being so small, it still is kind of small and growing, but as it gets exposed to more people and more people kind of find out about it, you want that kind of standard set high when people come in, because if the standard's already low and you start bringing more people in, I feel like it just kind of muddies up the water, and
it does, for sure.
It makes it rough, man. It makes it hard to expand or really be taken serious, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and to even add on to that, like I saw the recent interview you did with Adam Glass, And one of the things that I do agree with when he says people should locally bring up their competitions and introduce people to the sport and everything, and try and put, trying to put grip on the map, because he was right. When people try to rely on famous, more celebrity folks like Larry Wheels and Juju Mufu and Devin Lerman, you get these guys who will do a video on grip and you get, a couple million views. Okay. Sure, there's a lot of people that might buy a gripper because of it, but how many of those people are actually going to go into the contest, and like, can they even go to a contest? Is there a contest nearby where they live that they can actually access? That's more important to grow the sport. I think definitely locally, on the local level, it's definitely been slacking.
Yeah. And I think this past year, I would say we've probably seen a few more competitions and names pop up to where I think it's kind of heading in the right direction. But also, I think that carries over into the bigger competitions as well, because the more we build up locally, then it's like I just did King Kong yesterday. It's like, I think it was the biggest turnout that King Kong's had as long as it's been running, which is probably a decade or maybe even a little more. I want to say there was like 240 something male competitors and like 80 something women's competitors, maybe. So like a total of like 300 something. But the more that those venues and people kind of build up their local area, the bigger those other competitions get, or the steeper the competition gets for the Arnold or the Olympia or other stuff like that, nationals, So, or even like the North Americans, which is going to be held every 2 years now. But yeah, I think like you said, if people build up that local stuff and kind of find these people that are out there, because how many strong people are out there that we've never even heard of? I looked at the King Kong list and like half the top 10, I don't even recognize them. And I'm like, oh, so we got more competition coming in now, which to me is a very good thing. I like the competition to increase. And
because it makes what you're doing feel worthwhile and actually valuable and everything. If there's nobody else doing it or taking it seriously, then it's not worth doing.
And you kind of want to know where you stand, It's like you could lift at one place and be like, oh man, I'm the strongest guy in this city. And then you could go like 30 minutes down the road and you're like, oh, I'm not even in the top 10. Like you just don't know who's out there. So I think the bigger pool we can kind of pull from, you kind of get an idea of like, okay, what's truly elite and how good are certain lifters? You get a real accurate representation of kind of where you're at, as opposed to maybe certain areas or certain places. Some people maybe think they're a little bit stronger or farther ahead than they are, and they just haven't been exposed to what's out there in the world. But yeah, you have any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, I agree. And I'm actually considering, because Chicago here really doesn't have any like grip competitions or anything. I was surprised, to my knowledge, 3 years ago, after I'd certified on the 3.5, 2 weeks later, some guy messaged me on Instagram and he was like, yo, I saw your Captain the Crust profile thing on online. I saw the video and everything. I have a bunch of grip equipment in my garage, and I used to compete in grip a little bit. I was like, awesome, like, let's hang out and do some grip stuff. And that was, to me, that was really cool. And he has like a ton of stuff. I mean, he has a bunch of blobs. He has a bunch of dumbbells. He has one of those hex dumbbells almost, where it's like 3 inches thick and it's knurled. I think the only other person that has that in the United States is Jed Johnson.
I'd have to check, man, but it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just a bunch of like old grippers, single stamp number 3s and stuff like that. So it was pretty cool to see, but he was the only guy, and now he's moved to Arizona. So I haven't seen him in quite a long time, but I'm thinking definitely to host a competition in the future at the gym I go to, because it's a powerlifting, strongman bodybuilding gym. There's tons of people there that are pretty strong, and there's platforms for deadlifting, so it's pretty easy. You could just probably put on a Saxon, because I leave some of the equipment I have over there because it's a private gym. So
yeah, no, I think that'd be cool, man. And I think if you kind of showed some interest and got into hosting as well. That like you're saying, man, that'd be big for any area. Because like you said, I mean, you're very humble about it, but man, in the short amount of time that you've been in the sport, you've accomplished a lot of great things, and we can get into some of that stuff a little later. But you've kind of been respected out of the gate because you've proven yourself so early on. And if you were to kind of take on that role of hosting stuff, people would be very interested, I think, in competing at one of your contests or just having you involved with anything grip related, you know? So yeah, that'd be cool.
I hosted a Super Series venue 3 years ago. It was my first like thing, and I wanted to host it. And I remember I talked with Adam over the phone because he was interested in getting me to host because he knew that there were a lot of people in Chicago and stuff like that. At the time, I wasn't super comfortable with doing it because I was like, if I make a mistake, you know. But you know, I managed to weigh all the plates and film all that stuff and film the spinning of the RGT and all this stuff, and you know, filming the contestants. And one of the contestants, Dave Christopher, I'm sure you know that guy. He actually came to the venue that I hosted at the Super Series. But, you know, it was just like an arm wrestling practice at some park. And so a lot of the guys there didn't actually do all of the lifts and didn't want to like get their name on the records or whatever. So I felt like I had tried, but it wasn't as successful as I wanted it to be. But now I feel a little different about it because I have a lot more knowledge on the sport. And I have a feeling that there's quite a few people in the gym I go to that would be interested in it. So
yeah, well, man, hey, like I said, I look forward to seeing what develops from that. And like I said, I'm in Ohio now, so if you ever need any help with anything, or like I said, if it ever fits in the schedule, I might pop out and compete as well if you put something on, or like I said, help you out in person, whatever. So yeah, man, just kind of look forward to whatever that turns into. Because like I said, you probably, I mean, you've been in the sport, well, we'll say roughly, 4 years probably. Is that accurate?
Well, I mean, depends. In the sport, I would say about 3 years because I started doing the grip sport stuff in 2021-ish. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until, the 2021 August, something like that. That's when I hosted the first Super Series thing because I wanted to do well on that and everything. But I think, but I had done the gripper stuff before, like since 2019. But my first year in doing grippers, the progress was fairly quick early on. I bought that 1.5, closed it, and then within 2 weeks, I was doing a bunch of greasing the groove, and I'd been able to do some reps. But my reps were, at the time, because I didn't know how to set, so I wouldn't push the handle further up in my palm and set it and be able to rep it. I would just leave it back, like pretty far back, and just rely on the thumb to push and hold it. And so every time I did a rep, the handle would slide too far back for me to actually do anything. And I wasn't using chalk. So I would just do singles. So I was like 1, 2, 3, 4, and I would just set it and then do it. And I think after 2 months, I managed to get like 8 singles in a row. So I just bought a number 2 and I closed that out of the package because I figured like, okay, 7, 8, I should be able to be ready for a number 2. And then I did that for 2 months with the number 2. I bought the 2.5, closed that out of the package. But I also bought the 3 at the same time. I couldn't close that. Like I wasn't, that one surprised me quite a bit because I was expecting it to be more linear, but it almost felt more exponential, like, it's a big jump.
Yeah, man. So with you being, like I said, we'll say around that like 3-year mark and kind of discussing hosting, do you have plans to kind of stay in the grip sport and arm lifting world for a decent amount of time, at least in the future coming up? Do you feel like that's something you have interest in kind of sticking around for a while in?
Yeah. I mean, I remember last year, somebody asked me a similar question, and I was kind of bouncing between arm wrestling and grip sport and everything. And I was trying to juggle both of them at the same time. And I just realized that there's no real point to doing that, because if I want to get to, world level at one or the other, I kind of have to choose, right? So I can do arm wrestling training stuff on the side, but that's just training. I mean, that if you grab a karate belt and you do some pronation and supination, rising and ulnar deviation stuff, that's not actually arm wrestling. It's just doing some wrist and elbow work to keep your joints healthy and stuff. But if you asked me that a year ago, I didn't know what to answer. If you ask me now, I say definitely I want to stick with grip sport for a while, because I do find it more fun, and I don't know, I just like it, so I figure I stick with it.
No, I mean, I think a lot of people will be happy to hear that. And we spoke quite a bit. I want to say, what was it? Maybe 2 Arnolds ago, or maybe, I think 2 years ago at the Arnold. No, it wasn't
2023 Arnold's. We spoke.
I think
that
so.
Was that was when we were at the left corner side.
Yeah.
With the stage. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to say that Arnold, I was really excited for. I believe you competed at 100 kg for that one. So you're at 100 kilos, and I want to say you took second that year.
Yeah.
To Eric, but that was the year for me that, like you said, you kind of had done the Super Series stuff. You had, obviously been well established on grippers, but I want to say it's when you pretty much like matched Eric, like head to head on the rolling handle, and had that big pull on the rafter. And I was like, oh, like shit, like he's serious now. Like he's like upped his level. So at least, like I said, behind the scenes, you might have been doing some, you maybe knew what you were capable of, but I hadn't seen it like that. And to do it at the Arnold, I was like, oh man, like he's going to be a problem for people in the next coming years. Like, and they said you placed very well there and went on to win the following year. But yeah, I don't know. What was that kind of like, I guess, for you going from the grippers and doing maybe most of the stuff like Super Series, like kind of smaller scale, and then almost just jumping right into the big stuff. And I don't know, like I guess turning that corner from when you went from like being like kind of, oh, he's kind of a gripper guy, and then you're just like, oh no, now I can kind of do it all, and this is where this is what I'm doing.
Well, for that 2023 Arnold, I didn't have any of the implements at the time, so I didn't have like any real training for it. I was just doing arm wrestling stuff, so I was just doing cupping. I think the cupping definitely helped, but to be fair, the rolling handle we used was fairly thin. It was 1.75 inch Raptor, which means that wrist strength really didn't contribute much to it because it's so thin. So it's mostly just like fingers. So it just ended up in the fingers. And I don't know. I figured training grippers trained your finger flexors through a dynamic, it's through a range of motion. You train the finger flexors. And so I don't know. I shouldn't say it's too surprising, because if you're really good at grippers, you should be good at just like holding things with your fingers, right? I think it's mostly when it comes to axle, rolling thunder, stuff that a bigger diameter, because it requires your wrist to stay intact, because your hand is open, and that's more applicable for people who don't have great coverage. So like if I grab this water bottle, it's like a huge space here. I can't rely on bending my wrist back and pulling with my fingers and my thumb, because I need my wrist to cup in and keep the fingers underneath it, So yeah, there was definitely it was a good lift, but I figured I could do more, because I was not going to the Arnold's particularly to be like winning and stuff. I kind of just wanted the experience of going to a contest and meeting all these people and stuff like that. And then it wasn't until last year where I was just like, okay, well, let's do a 3-month training block for this stuff and we'll see how it goes. So it went well.
Yeah. And I say, well, you won The last Arnold at 100 kilos. And how did you feel during that competition? Like I said, kind of going back and forth with Eric. I don't necessarily remember exactly how close things were. But what was it like? Because that 100 kilo class is usually very stacked, and it's tough, man.
Yeah, it was pretty good. But I think we had like most guys in that class lifting over 400 pounds on that rogue axle.
Mm-hmm.
And going into that competition, I had I had a pretty good feeling. I was pretty confident because I knew I had looked at the numbers that Eric has pulled on the Saxon and the axle, and I knew that my biggest issue was going to be if I could get my axle up, because I didn't think he was stronger than me at the Saxon bar, because I'm better at Saxon than I am at axle.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the limitations for me has always been my left hand, because I'm so right hand dominant with the gripper closes. So my fingers on my right are much, much stronger than the left. So when I do like an axle bar, sometimes I'll hold it. Sometimes my right hand will be like completely closed and the left is like barely holding on,
Mm-hmm.
you know, for dear life by the fingertips. So I had to make sure that my left was keeping up. And going into that, I was feeling confident. I thought I could beat Eric. And then once we started doing the same weight jumps, because I figured like I'll let him decide what weight jumps we do, because I'm okay with doing I think it was 10 kilos. It was doing 10-kilo jumps, so 22-pound jumps, or 5-kilo jumps. But I prefer, especially for an axle, such a big lift,
Yeah.
10 kilos is better for the singles. And, we just kept matching each other. And I was kind of surprising myself a little bit. Like, okay, I had not done anything above 392 in training. But to be fair, the axle at my gym is significantly harder. It's like a 52 millimeter and 72 pounds. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's not the same as a rogue axle. So I was a little bit, when I stood over the rogue axle and I felt how like grippy it is, because the one at my gym is slippery. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
take chalk very well. So I was like, okay, wow, this is gonna be easier. But I just didn't know if my body could lift that much weight. So I was really just hoping, just put the belt on, just brace, just take it all on your back, just whatever you can to get that thing up, because if you can hold it, you're fine. So yeah, it was close though. It was close. He definitely pushed me to win. Yeah.
Gotcha, man. Now with that being said, is the Arnold kind of your main focus that you kind of are training for in the sport right now? Because I mean, I see you do a lot of axle work, Saxon work, and it's, typically the same diameters or width that, that the Arnold's going to contest. Is that kind of like the main goal right now? You're kind of looking forward to the Arnold. Is there anything before that you'll be doing, or what's that looking
Yeah.
like?
So the reason I do that mainly is because, in my opinion, I think in order to build up the most amount of not only full body strength but also total grip strength would be to do the more compound lifts. So a heavy two-hand Saxon is definitely going to strengthen my pinch and my wrist to a greater degree than just doing like a pinch block. Whereas I would train a pinch block for a specific event if that's
Mhm.
what it was being contested. But to get the strength, I would definitely do the axle and the Saxon. So I like doing that because it just keeps me year round. It keeps me getting stronger, and that's why I've been doing it, because I've only started training Saxon in the last year. So it was more of just like getting the weight up, because if I stop training it, it's not going to go up, and then I gotta
Yeah.
contest it in 2 months, and I gotta be nervous about that. So there's no point.
Yeah. Okay. So we kind of spoke a little bit about the competitions, and obviously, looking forward to seeing you compete at the Arnold coming up. Well, yeah, be next March or whatever. So there's still a lot of time, but with the competition side of things, Another thing that's big in the grip world that I guess grippers could almost fall into that category, assuming it's not in a contest, but is sort of the like feats of strength. So, I mean, I've seen you lift
Mhm.
inch dumbbells. Um, what other kind of feats have you set your eyes on? Do you have anything on that side of things as a goal, or maybe like a side mission aside from the big competition that
Yeah,
maybe
for
you'd like to
sure.
knock
Yeah.
out? And if you keep it secret, or do you have any that you want to put out publicly that maybe you're
I
chasing?
don't have to keep it secret, don't worry. But I think,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, there's quite a few. Like, I know there's a lot of strength feats out there, and like I have my eyes on a few of them, and I don't really have a time. I don't really have a time limit on when I should do it. I just know that whenever in the future, that has to be like my ultimate goal. I have like an ultimate goal, and I have things that I kind of focus on one step at a time. You don't climb a mountain by only thinking about the top of it. You got to think about the steps in front of you, otherwise you're never gonna make it, right? You got to keep yourself busy. So definitely stuff like 500-pound axle bar,
Mhm.
300-pound Saxon bar deadlift, uh, the two deep dish York plate pinch. Uh, I want to clean an inch dumbbell, but I want to do it strict. So I want to do it like um, I guess the way that Kyle did it, where you kind of just like row it and then you
A
clean it.
little more, yeah, kind of like more level.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
I got you,
I cannot tilt lift these things for some reason. My
man.
wrist does not like doing that.
I'm not the best tilt lifter either, so
Yeah,
I kind of feel you on that. Some people just have that mobility in their wrist, and they have that kind of that movement. I can tilt some bells, but it's not like the level lifts for me. So yeah, if I were ever to attempt that one day as well, the only way I think I'd get it done would be level because I feel like I would lose a I don't know. In my opinion, it would almost be a longer hill to climb if I tried doing it with all the kind of like the swinging motion and tilting it. I think that would take me longer to train for than just kind of brute forcing it with the level strength. But no, yeah,
yeah,
that's always a good one. Like I said, man, it'd be cool. Anybody cleans the inch dumbbell, it's always kind of a rare category to be in. You know,
yeah. And I think if I would do it, it I don't know, it would be more on the. I think doing it at a lighter body weight leveled. I don't know who's the lightest to have done it. I know that the guy on Instagram, Ben,
yeah,
he did it recently. Uh, like he just ripped it off the ground and put it on his neck.
yeah. I know you're
I
talking
was like,
about.
I saw the video for the first time, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, ooh. I thought for a second like he dropped it on his neck. I was like, man, you crazy to put that thing right there. I was like, I'm
Yeah,
not doing that.
I don't know if that was a technique we had really seen before, but yeah, that's Ben, I believe from New Jersey. He kind of has done some lifting and stuff with Tim Butler and some of the guys out that way. Um, I I'm not good at pronouncing his last name, so I won't try. But yeah, he goes by like Benny Boy Lifts online or whatever.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah,
Ben is strong, and I think him and Ben Helms are probably the two lightest to clean it. Um,
yeah, like
I,
230, 235 ish, right?
yeah, in that range. And then, well, at least for the press part, I think for the clean and press, it's like 230s. But I want to say Ben Helms was probably cleaning it when he wasn't landing the press. He was probably still cleaning it like in the 220s. But but it's also
Yeah,
different techniques. They kind of have different techniques in the way that they clean it. But it's still ridiculous either way. I mean, to me.
yeah. I think that cleaning it to me is more indicative of somebody's grip strength. The pressing for me, I get the feet because it's paying respect to the feet, but it's not
Yeah,
really a grip feat. So to
yeah.
me, and I don't know how strong I can get my shoulders to press 178 pounds. It'll be quite a few. It'll be quite a feat actually. I don't think anyone like to be so on the lighter side to do that, and plus if you're natural, I don't know, because that's very difficult to do.
Yeah.
But you
I
know,
think I've only
naturally
seen,
cleaning it, I think it's doable.
yeah, I would agree. Um, and as far as like the press goes, I agree. It's not really necessarily a grip feat other than, I mean, you're just kind of controlling controlling the bell, but it's not
Yeah,
really the focus on the grip as much. But yeah, and I think his name is, I want to say, and Jed Johnson just did a video where he kind of broke down everybody that's kind of cleaned or cleaned and pressed the inch dumbbell, and he kind of broke
yeah,
down all their technique and stuff. It was a pretty cool video to check out. So if anybody's into inch dumbbell stuff or inch cleans, check that video out that Jed did. Kind of, just breaking down people's form and breaking down the different techniques. But the one that always kind of stood out to me, I think his name is Shane Green. He was like a Canadian strongman. But that dude, when he did it, it wasn't like a push press or anything. He like strict pressed it. And I'm just like,
yeah,
oh my God, like how strong would you have to be to not only just rip it off the floor like that, but then basically strict press it? It's like, that's just wild. So like I said, maybe not so much grip, but just the overall power to do that is like ridiculous, man.
yeah. I'm more impressed when I saw the video of him cleaning it, because he looks shorter and stockier and heavier. He's not like a really tall guy, it seems. And
I'm not sure.
typically
Yeah.
when a guy is like really big and burly, his coverage is not that great because his hands would be a little beefier.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I'm more impressed with that for sure. And some feats definitely favor leverages. Like if you're, 6'6", Kim Johansson, you're not really gonna press that thing as easily as a guy who's on the shorter side, and something like Eddie Hall. It's just he's
Yeah.
a lot stockier and just can press it easier.
No, that's definitely a good point to kind of bring up. There are so many variables, whether it be competition handles or feats of strength, like we're mentioning. Um, there's so many variables. Some things just fit people's hands a certain way, their hand anatomy, the body leverages for the heavier body lifts. It's really kind of a crazy sport when we think about it, because there's
Yeah,
guys that are like super strong on two hand lifts, but their single hand lifts aren't good. There's guys that are killers on single hand lifts, but their two hand lifts aren't good. There's guys that can pinch, but they can't do this or that. It's like there's so many different ways to kind of, I guess, be successful in the sport or test yourself in the sport. And that's why I think when somebody that comes along and kind of has a well-rounded game and you almost can't pick out any weaknesses, that's when it's usually the most impressive to me, because I'm like, man, they can, crush, they got thick bar, they got pinch, their overall body strength. It's a tough thing to achieve, but I think to me, that's some of the more exciting lifters to follow in the sport, is when they're not just
yeah.
like a kind of a,
A 1 through 20. Yeah.
boxing themselves in that one lane. So speaking of stuff like that, do you have anybody that any lifters that you follow, or anybody in the sport that that you kind of I guess enjoy watching their training or kind of watching some of the feats they do? I don't want to necessarily say like, oh, like who are you a fan of? Because I mean, a lot of us that are lifting, it's like, well, man, I'm not really fans of these people. I mean, sometimes it's people we're talking to on a daily basis,
Right,
um,
right.
but is there anybody that I guess kind of like inspires you or motivates you that you're seeing training right now, and who would that be?
Definitely one of the first people to inspire me was David Shamey. Now
Mhm.
he's not really in the grip scene much anymore, but because he's on
Right.
the strongman side. But he was one of the first people that I was watching, and I was kind of like, I was pretty impressed because he's not, his hand size is not that great, and closing the grippers that he closed, and cleaning the inch dumbbell and pressing it and stuff like that. He's a fairly strong guy, so he was one of the first guys, and also like, um, I don't know, he was one of the first people that I saw with grippers. I think I saw his Ironman certification around a similar time that I started grippers. So like, huh. But at the time, I was like I was so ignorant. I thought he was cheating because he was using both hands to set it below and then
Oh
open
yeah.
up to the card. I was like, why is he doing that? Just set it once and then you're good, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, another person definitely Carl Majko. He has helped me out quite a bit, taught me a lot of stuff about good sport, and a lot of that has just been like just meeting him in person. Like I remember the first time I met him, he shared some of his stuff with me, and recently, like in the last year, I went to go train with him out in California. We trained in his garage for a Friday session and a Monday session, and it was cool. Like he has he has quite a few stuff in his garage, and he has a lot of tips. Like he's a smart guy, you know. Some people a little bit on you know, self-kept side, and so you have to kind of poke and prod a little bit to get information out of them. But once you do, it's like, you know, it's valuable stuff typically.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah, and seeing his feats and everything, especially with the grippers, really kind of pushed me to just keep going. You know, because he was always that guy that was, you know, just a step ahead of me on the grippers. I'm trying to catch up, and then he goes again, and then trying to catch up. You know, it's like a little curve. You get closer to him, and then he just, you know, he just shoots out. So yeah,
yeah, man, I've had some stuff like that too, you know, where I don't know, and in that case, you're aware of what Carl's doing, but I've had situations where I'm uh, like legit, let's just say like when I was in the army and I like had to do a run or something, and if I didn't know the person in certain situations, it's like I'd be chasing somebody thinking like, man, I'm like out of shape. I'm like going super slow, but it's just because they're such a freak. They're so fast, but I'm trying to, you know, catch up to them or whatever. And
yeah,
then I'll end up like running the fastest times I've ever ran for that distance just because I had somebody else there pushing me. So that that's a good problem to have, or it's a good thing to kind of chase when you have someone like that. Do you have, just because we're talking about a little bit of the grippers there, or kind of maybe chasing Carl with some of that stuff? Um, I know a big thing is the certification for the number 4 for Iron Mind, Captains of Crush number 4. Um, do you have plans to certify the 4, and do you kind of have that mapped out, or is it kind of back to what we said with the feats? There's not necessarily a timeline, but you're planning on doing it.
not necessarily a timeline. I have always thought, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I have a history of with the Forcer. I would think that I'm closer than I actually am. So I'd be
Okay.
like, okay, 3 more months. Oh shit, I'm not ready yet. You know, 3 more months.
Yeah.
You know, still.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's it's definitely one of the hardest feats, I think, because there's guys out there that have the potential to do it. Finding people with the potential to do it is already difficult because if you don't have a certain hand size, and that's just, you know, people always talk about hand size from the wrist crease
Mm-hmm.
to the middle finger, but
Yeah.
your pinky length is also important. These two fingers are very important, especially when you're talking about wide setting grippers.
Mm-hmm.
It's a triangle, right? So it's always widest at the bottom. So if you can't get these fingers on yet, then, you know, good luck. So trying to find people with that kind of build is already difficult, you know, big thumb pad and just stuff like that. And uh, you know, on top of that, it takes a long, long time. You know, I mean, contrary to what we have seen in recent years, where people just breeze right past these grippers, it's not really that easy. I can say that with confidence because I have breezed past to. I remember breezing right to the 195, 200 range, and suddenly it hit me like a wall. You know, it's like, oh shit, this is difficult, right? Because all of a sudden, when you reach that point, and I noticed certain people in recent years as well who are legit, who are
Yeah.
legit. They do the grippers and they get to 190s, maybe like high 190s, and then their progress starts to slow down considerably. Like suddenly you see only like 1 or 2 RGC increase within a month or two,
Mm-hmm.
and that's more reasonable. And I have a theory that that's kind of like because there's people out there that start training grippers but their base is already pretty high because they have a good amount of muscle mass on their forearms. Like Ben Helms or Jalen, they started out already with pretty developed forearms. So when they started grippers, they just went right through, the 2.5, 3, 3.5, and then you can see now they're up to the 190s, but unless they start specializing past that point, they're not really going to get any stronger on that. Like, it's very difficult. It's one of those things that requires much more specificity towards it and just more like priority. So you got to program it specifically just to keep it the most important lift of your week. And that's what's difficult about it, because you can't just you can't just train it kind of lackadaisically and just go through with it. You have to really, train and dedicate yourself to it. And that's what I've been doing for quite a while now. And I'm definitely progressing, but I don't know exactly when I'm going to set the floor.
Okay. Yeah. And I want to say, like you mentioned, man, it's the set, it's like the anatomy of the hand too, because I think that I just know from talking to him personally, Ben Helms is like he's really gotten on a gripper kick. And I think that is kind of like the thing he's prioritizing the most. But I think he's just been kind of going with more like parallel sets or kind of deeper sets like that. And he hasn't been focusing on the credit card. So like I think he's closed a couple number 4s or like maybe low 200s, but I think that would significantly probably go down a bit once you start getting into the card, because that's just a whole different thing. And it kills me because my whole pinky almost comes off the gripper when I do credit card sets. And I'm just
it's not really like, it's not super fair in my opinion. I think what would be more fair is if you gave different size cards for people. So like if somebody's hand, like if their pinky cannot really hold on the handle too well, if they have to open way too much to lose the leverage, on a 54 millimeter card, just give them 50, and if that's too small, give them a 45. If you can kind of just shift it smaller, it's still a wide set for them. I mean, I would say that if somebody has a shorter hand than me, but the position that I place the gripper in and the position I get the card to fit in, the position of my hand in that distance, if you shrink it a little bit and put it for a person with smaller hand and it's the exact same hand position, I think that's a perfectly reasonable way to compare the strength of the wide set. But if they do the same, like 200 and I do 200, and they do 45 and I do 50, I think that's perfectly fair.
Okay. So yeah, it's almost about kind of creating the same hand position or the same,
giving the same leverage,
range of motion.
like the same way that we do with the Mass Monster set. And of course, I mean, like you said with Ben, he's doing the low 200s on the 4, and that's really good. When you're talking about trying to credit card set a number 4, which, to certify, that means credit card setting like 215 to 220, because it's more than likely what you might end up getting.
Yeah.
Then you're talking about being able to deep set, parallel set. You got to parallel set like 50, 60 RGC more than that, which is ridiculous. I mean, that takes a long time. And we saw it with Carl. He trained for 7 years to get it, and it's not like he trained it a little bit. He was training every damn week.
Yeah, so, and like you said, it was the focus. It was really kind of what he was basing most of his training around. He was still killing all the other stuff and doing great, but that was like the priority, And I think my favorite gripper video, this is just like a side note, because usually like there's like lifting videos that'll get you hyped up. I'm gonna put this on record for me right now. My favorite gripper close that I've ever seen is GHP 10 Carl. That's my favorite gripper close. But I don't know. Do you have like a favorite gripper close? I know they're not as visually exciting as maybe the big deadlifts or something. Some lifts it's hard because it's usually just watching a person's hand. But when Carl closed the GHP 10 and was hyped up, I thought that was probably the one gripper video that I was like, man, okay, that was intense.
Yeah, and anyone who's ever tried a GHP 10 knows that it's not for humans. Almost like it's more like a collector's thing. You know, I mean, obviously, I plan to close it in the future if I can, but
Yeah.
you know, it's just trying to just feel that thing out. It's crazy. For him to close that is just speechless.
Yeah, that was a cool one, man. I'll ask this one just because with grip sport and just the history of it, um, grippers have been a gateway for a lot of people to get into the sport, and this will be one for all the I guess we could say gripper nerds out there. But do you have a favorite brand of gripper or like anything like, because I mean there's people that collect like Teddings or they got the Captains of Crush, the GHP. Do you have a certain brand or like a model of gripper that you kind of prefer or that you just like the style of?
Mm, I think I have more gripper brands that I just dislike more than I have favorites.
Yeah.
So I don't particularly like some of the gripper brands out there because they just don't feel that good, and maybe the handles are not gnarled enough and they're slippery and stuff. But I think the Can Power standard grippers are pretty good quality. I like them, especially the newer ones. I think the first gen was a little bit. The first gen was difficult to close wide set and easier to close deep set because the handle was slightly thicker.
Okay.
So if you position it off, you know, back in your palm and you try to credit card set it, you get less of a bite. So it's harder to actually open up the card fully. But of course it closes sooner because the handles are thicker, so it's a little easier to deep set it. GHPs are pretty good. Captains of Crush are, you know, standard normal stuff. Grip Genies I like because they're on the narrower side. So I like doing the Grip Genie 7 because it's a good kind of warm up for the heavier grippers. But I'm not like a huge fan of the newest one that they made because it's a little too thick and it's almost like it's the same thing as like a Hulk gripper, which I don't like those kind of grippers because they're too thick. Those are good for people with bigger hands, like longer fingers and stuff, because to them it's more normal. But for me, I don't like it.
Gotcha. I had a chance when I trained with Ben one time to try a Silarukov gripper. Have you had a chance to close one of those before?
No, I never tried one before. I've seen them online, but I've never seen one in person. So
I don't know if they're all like that, but the one that I tried had kind of a narrower spread to it, which
yeah,
I really liked. So kind of like you mentioned with a narrower spread, but the knurling was nice on it, and it had a narrower spread. So that was one that I was like, man, I wish I could get like a whole batch of those or something. You know what I mean? It might make me train grippers a little more than I do now, but yeah, man. I said had to ask about some grippers, just because, like I said, you're one of the guys at the top there doing it, and everybody has opinions on what they like, and some of these people they collect them and they go crazy with it. So I didn't know if you had a big collection or if you did a lot of that, or you just kind of got enough to get your training in, or
I have a fairly big collection of grippers over the years because when I was kind of going on my like 2021, I bought a lot of grippers because I wasn't training reps at the time. I was doing a lot of singles, so I'd just close a gripper and I just go for the next one. And so I wanted smaller jumps in between. And it's funny, I always get reminded of Adam Glass in one interview. He said, I I was watching a lot of his interviews in the past when I was first starting out, so I remember a couple things. I remember him saying like grippers were like a big waste of time because either like you're gonna own a bunch of paperweights on one side and you're only gonna be using a couple of these. I'm like, that's actually really true. I only use a couple of the grippers I actually have nowadays, and the rest of them are just sitting there collecting dust and rust. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think I got about let me see, maybe about 9 or 10 grippers total right now, hanging on
That's
the
all
wall.
you need. It's all you need.
Yeah. And I don't have any plans unless I saw something really cool or something that stood out. But yeah, for now, I'm okay with that. Uh, trying to think of kind of where to go off of that gripper stuff. Because I don't want to hammer the gripper. Like I said, you're good at grippers, but like I said, you're good at so many other things too. And we've kind of discussed some future feats and the competitions. And we discussed kind of getting into hosting more, building stuff at the local level. Are there? I guess another question that could pop up is, aside from like, oh well, what do we need to do to build the sport, or um, blah blah blah, XYZ training question. Is there anything, just and this is just straight your opinion or whatever you want to say, is there anything that you've been witnessing in the sport? And by sport, I just mean anything that's testing grip strength. We have multiple organizations, whatever. Is there anything you're seeing in the sport that you think could be improved on? Or is there anything that you're seeing that maybe you think needs to be changed? Or like I said, maybe you don't have any opinions on that, but just curious.
I know recently the topic of bracing was pretty discussed about. One of the things I don't really like is it's difficult to know, right? So I don't know, about like Jed when he was talking about bracing on the thigh with Saxon lifts and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like how are you supposed to lift the Saxon without doing that? Almost, it's like, or like an axle, for example. It's a little difficult to just hold a weight in front of you. Yeah, sure, that's full grip strength, because that way, if it's gonna fall out, it will fall. Otherwise, if you kind of pin it, you can kind of save it and then you can drop it. Like some people do that at the competition when they rely on the lockout. Like you'll see some people like the hand just opened up and then they look down and then they kind of roll it down their leg, which is okay, sure. But I think it's better in those kind of lifts to have it just allowed to just kind of roll up. Obviously, you can't hitch, but I think that's normal to just have it go up like a normal deadlift.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Um,
Usually, like I feel, me personally, bracing is like the biggest issue on loading pins because the pole height is so high, and when it's a single hand lift, that's where it's really a problem. If someone were to technically, in my opinion, like brace a Saxon or axle, they would have to almost like a couple inches above the knee, have early thigh contact. And then you're almost getting into a hitch. Then maybe it's a brace. But yeah, when you pull the hips through, there should almost be kind of a natural contact with your body.
And you kind of push against it too, because you want to
get the hips through.
Keep it from dropping.
Yeah. I mean, it's a maximal pull, and you got to get the hips through. So for that, I never have really had an issue with like that last 2 or 3% of the lift when you're just completing the lockout. Like you've already lifted it, boom, okay. There's that kind of what we call like incidental contact or just natural body contact for a deadlift. But yeah, on the single hand loading pin lifts, I don't know. Like I said, you see people, the weights start getting hard, they start getting a little more desperate. Their technique starts to change. They start trying to, pin it against the leg more. That's what I usually have issues with. But yeah, I think
I've seen some of that stuff, and I know that it's kind of like there's memes about it and everything. I think that I think it would be fair just to have, like, for example, if somebody's on the shorter side, like for example at Arnold, I remember seeing for like hilt lifts or rolling thunder lifts for the women's who are on the shorter side. For them, it's very awkward to lift a loading pin that's like literally at their kneecaps. Yeah. Like that's kind of like you can do it, but it feels harder and it just makes it harder to hold on to.
The leverage, it's back to leverage again, really, because you don't really have good leverage. You don't really have that good like leg drive and kind of like pop out of the bottom.
Yeah, you need the leg drive to kind of push it. And I think it would be better for like shorter competitors, either just put them on blocks to stand on or just have a shorter loading pin, which would be easier. Like I think certifications should just allow that, like Iron Mine, Rolling Thunder, something like just have a shorter loading pin. I don't think it doesn't actually change the lift. Like if somebody is shorter but they get the same drive as the taller guy, it's the same lift really. So
It kind of goes back to your point with the different sized credit cards, where we're
yeah,
just making sure that kind of the range of motion is relatively the same or normal and kind of lining up. It's not like, oh, they're lifting less weight or they're cheating cheating the system or whatever. Um,
hmm
I could definitely see that. But yeah, and I guess a lot of that kind of falls on judging, is people just have to, like, if they're going to be in the sport or want to host and do things, it's like, just be aware of your own sport's rules and be able to enforce them. I think that's a big problem too, is I think some people, when they judge, oftentimes it's around, how do I put it? It's either around people that are like in their circle, it's their friends, and they don't want to say no. And then there's also that sometimes they get in a room and someone might be a bigger name lifter than them, and they don't want to tell that guy no, and it's like, the lift is either good or it's not. And we can't necessarily let that affect. So if someone is going to take on that hosting or judging role, you have to kind of almost treat it like, if this person's a day one lifter or it's the greatest lifter to ever live, the standard almost has to be the same. But we kind of see it shift sometimes with that, at least in my opinion, I would say. But
yeah,
yeah, I think
I
that's one of
agree.
the issues one of the issues we have. I'm not saying that would, fix everything or something like that. But yeah, I think you see certain people get some lifts and some people don't, and it's kind of hit or miss. And I think that just being able to say no is a big part of
Yeah,
judging, you know.
yeah.
So
And if that person, like if an individual is being accused of bracing and they're uh like if that loading pin height is too much, I think it would be simpler to let them do it with a shorter loading pin and then see if they still brace it, then they're bullshitting. If they're not bracing it and they do a complete lift, then yeah, it's
yeah,
allowed and they were right to complain. So
yeah, man. I think you wrote down. I'm going to double check real quick. Um, I had like a questions for me section sometimes on here. So you had mentioned like what's my favorite grip competition of all time?
mhm.
Um, is that something I competed in, or you just mean
No,
anyone?
like all time, like
Okay.
because I mean, me and you, we haven't competed in that many, and we've
Yeah.
only been in the sport for a couple of years now. So yeah,
Yeah. Um, man, it it's tough, but when I go back and watch them, the I think the old Mighty Mitts competitions were pretty awesome, man, because just the crowd just seemed to be so much bigger, and just the names and the people, it's the guys that kind of paved the way for us to maybe come along and find out about this. So I,
yeah,
I like watching the old Mighty Mitts videos. I do like, even though they're maybe not as big as far as the big expo type thing, I like watching some of the old school ones where, like, maybe you'd have guys like Jed or Andrew Derniat,
yeah,
and they might be trying to, like, Chad Woodall, and they're like trying to set like the Euro two-hand pinch record or something, and it's a smaller, kind of tighter knit competition, but the energy's high,
yeah,
and they're hyped up. So I know that's not like a specific one comp, but those kind of old school competitions where the intensity was up, I kind of like seeing that energy in them competitions. And yeah, the Mighty Mitts ones are tough to beat because just the implements, the medleys, the stage, the just that era. I don't think we've seen anything really like it again, since then for grip, in my opinion. But
yeah. I mean, that's it's the same answer for me actually.
okay. Is it
Yeah, Mighty
okay?
Mitt.
I,
Yeah,
I was going to flip the question back on you, man, and ask you the same thing, and see. But yeah, I had a chance to talk with Richard a little bit about Mighty Mitts when he did the show with me, and that was cool. Just kind of getting his take on it and some of the stuff like that, because man, he put together some of the best grip competitions we've seen, and some of the biggest
yeah,
names and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know. In my opinion, it's there's still some big competitions coming up. There's people, making more competitions and kind of coming up with stuff. We still have kind of the staple events for, the expos, but yeah, that sort of that cream of the crop, the best of the best, mighty mitts, invite only. It might not be
Yeah,
it might not be as inclusive as people like it for all of the lighter weights or women's lifters, but if you just want to see the biggest, strongest grip freaks in the world go at it and do stuff, man, Mighty Mitts was just cool as hell. And
yeah, they
that's
had quite a lot of people. Like I think Mark Henry, Rich Williams,
like Tex
Chad Woodall,
Henderson, yeah,
Ted
Woodall.
Johnson, Tex Henderson, Andrew Derniat.
Adam was in at
Um,
least one or two of them, at least. I think Adam did a couple.
yeah,
Um,
he did.
um,
Um, Probably one of my favorite guys though was Mike Burke.
oh man, no, Mike Burke is like that, like I don't know, like one of the strongest grips in history that sort of just gets overlooked. And
Yeah,
I, I don't know, man. I would love if Mike Burke just like reemerged out of nowhere and just came back and just felt like doing some grip stuff.
he's just
I, I feel like,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know what he's doing these days or what he's up to, but yeah, I feel like he'd probably just walk up to an inch dumbbell right now and clean it and not even care. Like, dude's just a monster. So yeah,
Yeah, he was really strong at the time, and I don't think he ever specialized in grip like some of the guys in like some of the top guys like Carl or something like that.
mhm.
I don't think he gave it like that due diligence kind of thing where he just all in on it because he was always training for world's strongest man. So
Yeah,
and the Arnold and all that stuff. So
yeah.
for him
I
to have that
think,
strong of a grip already was like
yeah, and I think that if he had like he's like the closest person we've ever seen to almost cleaning 2 inch dumbbells. Like his double
yeah,
inch clean attempts, a couple of them were pretty close. But like you
he got it
said,
right about here. Yeah,
and it's like, man, if I think if he just had 2 inch dumbbells sitting at his house and he specialized and trained in it, I think he would have done it probably easy. I say easy, but none of this stuff
no,
is
yeah.
easy. But I'm just saying, as close as he got, probably randomly trying them at expos without even training for it, I would say, dude, if that guy had those bells and was like set his mind on it, I think I don't know. I think it would happen. Now that I guess that could lead me into another thing. You think we'll ever see a double inch dumbbell clean?
Anytime soon?
Probably
I
not.
don't know. I
Yeah.
know there's some people out there with some interesting ideas for inch dumbbell feats.
Mhm.
I think you know what I'm talking about, but
Yeah.
I don't know anyone's gonna do it. Like it takes a special kind of like you need somebody who's a strongman guy because you got to be strong enough to clean both of those things, and somebody who's a strongman who's got big enough hands actually trains it enough. You know, it's I don't know if grip is at that point yet where you're gonna get that kind of guy, but
Hmm.
I think it's possible. Like Mike Burke definitely showed it was possible, you know, with how close he got it. So
Yeah. No, yeah. Yeah. Mike Burke is one of those dudes that still just flies under the radar. But yeah, it would be cool if we could get like I mean everybody has kind of a window too sometimes, but grip you can carry grip, pretty late, later years. So it's like a lot of these guys we're talking about, they're not ancient. It'd be cool if they'd come around and just see where they're still at with some of the grip stuff, you know. But
yeah, I think though, like the thing about like the old age and the grip, I think one of the issues is the body starts failing a little bit. So then it's
yeah,
like if you look at like old Haugen, his grip is really strong, but can his body handle some of the weight that he's trying to, you know, pick up? It almost feels like it's limiting. Well, I do feel like a prime age for grip is right around your 30s, like 30s, 40s. And once you
hmm,
start getting past that, especially for some people that were, you know, competing competitively at other sports and they were on some sauce, then if they come off of it, it only worsens, you know, their chances.
right,
So I'm
yeah,
not sure, but it's possible.
okay. Um, and I kind of mentioned earlier, just because we were talking grippers, I said, Carl closing the GHP 10 was probably my favorite gripper close. And we kind of talked about, favorite competitions. Do you have any like favorite feats of grip strength that you've seen? Like if you could list like, I don't know, a handful that you've seen, like just, I guess, moments in like grip feat history. Is there any certain ones that stand out or kind of motivate you the most, or ones that you just always kind of like seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I like Jed Johnson's double two-handed York plate pinch.
Mhm.
I like some of the stuff that Adam Glass did, where he did like a muscle up on two pinch blocks and then a back lever. That stuff's
Mhm.
pretty cool. Some of the stuff that Carl does, I mean, sometimes I feel like every week he's posting some ridiculous feat of strength that no one's ever done before, you know. So
Yeah.
he has a lot of, he has a lot on his list there. But you know, there's a ton of them. You know, Nathan Hall, for instance, closing number four at that time was very rare, and he
Mhm.
was very strong. So
Yeah, man. No, I think those are all good ones. Yeah. Is there any subject you can think of that you would like to dive in on that maybe we didn't cover or kind of get to really?
I mean, I guess maybe like training, programming, stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, because that's something that everybody does a little different. We
Yeah,
talk about like everybody being a little different with the hand size and whatever. Uh, people's, recoveries and approach, some guys are like, man, I'll take a complete week or two off a grip before a competition. Other people are like, nah, man, I'm still training close up to it. And some people are, you know,
yeah.
heavier singles. Some people are no singles in its volume. So yeah, man, if you want to kind of go into that for sure, I think that would be interesting. And everybody, when I interview people, especially high level guys, not that everybody's trying to find out the secrets. There's not necessarily any secrets to training, but everybody's always like, well, ask people about their training, ask them about their training. And sometimes people don't want to go into details about what they're doing because it could come across as a little boring, or maybe they are trying to hold back what they're doing a little bit. But yeah, anything you want to speak on when it comes to training, man, for sure.
On that topic of the rest between the final day of your prep and then the competition, Eric recently on your show, he mentioned that it's best to do it, you know, within 10, 14 days ish. And I agree. That's about as much as I took off. Like before the Arnold, I took about 10 days off from my last like heavy thing. And then I just didn't do
Hmm.
anything before that. So I think, especially in a very connective tissue sport, you need to give your connective tissue time to rest because they do recover slower than the muscles do. So it's pretty important for a grip competition. You got to make sure that you're not getting any aches and pains suddenly before
Hmm.
the competition. You know, if you max out a week before, it's not a good sign. You know, unless you're like way stronger than everyone that's going to be there and it's some local competition, then it makes sense. It's like whatever, you know. But if you're going to a competition where you want to show your best and hit PRs and stuff, like don't just, even if you think that a session, like one more session might give you an edge, don't do it. It's not, there's no point to it. Like if you've
Yeah.
gotten as strong as you can to be able to compete, just make sure that you're well rested and recovered for that competition and you'll do fine. If you want to get stronger, do it after the competition, you know,
Yeah.
like start training again, make sure it doesn't happen, you know.
That's a that's a tough thing for some people to learn, and I definitely I struggled with it early on because I would be that guy that's like, man, I keep seeing progress, and I'm lifting almost every other day. I'm just going to keep doing that right into the competition, and then you hit a certain point when you get into those bigger weights that it's like this isn't sustainable, and you're almost going to start doing more harm than good for your recovery. And I've had people like getting ready for fights or doing fight camps from other gyms or something that maybe would reach out to me and be like, it'd be like 6 days out from their fight. And they'll be like, hey, you think you could come over and do this and that? I'm like, it's too late. Like,
Yeah,
it's the week of. You're not gonna get any better in a couple days. Like the
yeah,
work
no.
should already be done. So it's like I got nothing for you on that. You
You
know what I
should be
mean? Like
resting. You should be like, you know,
so
sitting back and just kind of trying to relax,
yeah,
lower stress
so
levels and stuff.
yeah, for sure. So I say with your training, one thing, like I said, you have mentioned already that you kind of like to focus on the compound lifts, you know, just kind of the bigger bang for your buck movements. Um, I will say this, and you can answer this or not. It's up to you totally. But sometimes I see you pulling with straps on the axle, and sometimes I see you not. Do you have a specific way that you kind of set that up? And like I said, and you, like I said, feel free to say whatever you want about it. But yeah,
Yeah.
is there a method for that, or you know, what was kind of the thought process there?
Yeah, mainly it was just to build up my full body strength. So
Mhm.
what I'll do is I'll kind of do it where if I'm off season, whatever that's supposed to be, I'm only competing in like 1 or 2 contests this year, but whatever. And so that's when I'm not close to a contest. I want to get my full body strength up for the deadlift because for me, the actual as I get my hand stronger, my body also needs to get stronger with it because
Mhm.
the more weight I can hold, the more my hands will get stronger. So for me, it was priority like for past like after the Arnold, I immediately started doing deadlifts with straps because I was trying to build up my actual like deadlifting strength so that when I back down for competitions and stuff, when I
Yeah.
start training just regular double overhand, it feels light enough so it's not hitting my back as much and I don't feel as fatigued, you know, CNS wise. So I can just really focus on the grip.
Mhm.
What I do is I will so if I'm doing like a block for deadlifting, I'll do 1 set of 10 with let's say 300, and then the next week 2 set of 10 with 300. Then the week after that, 1 set of 10 with 310 or 315, and then 2 sets of 10, and then I'll just do that for 6 weeks. So 3 weight jumps, and you know each jump has 2 sets. So I do that, and after each working set on the deadlift, I'll back down and take some weight off the bar, and I'll just do the wrist curl double overhand. So the wrist curls I found actually help more with axle and Saxon bar than actually deadlifting it
Mhm.
because it's a dynamic range of motion. It puts your muscles through more wear and tear. So your muscle gets stronger, but because you keep doing, you know, submax singles with the weights, for example, on the Saxon and an axle, those new fibers that you just grew, you recruit them and then you start getting stronger. So you kind of do it like one and then it gets stronger and then time passes and it gets stronger. So that's why I like doing it because it's a way for me to still increase my deadlift while also increasing my hand and wrist at the same time. So that when I do go to an axle bar, I could not do a double overhand axle for 6 weeks and it still goes up because of the wrist curl. Like the wrist is pretty much all that matters there. So
Yeah. Okay. Um, are there any single hand lifts is there any like single hand training you're doing at all? Even or is it like only if it pops up in a competition, then you focus on it? Or are you still kind of maybe supplementing any single hand work in?
right now I am because I'm registered for the uh, world's strongest grip competition that Will Giuliani is hosting at the LA Fit Expo on January 26th,
Okay.
and they have Rolling Thunder first event, Axle Bar second event, Saxon Bar third event, and then a hold for time um, on some implement on the fourth event. So right now I just do on Mondays, for instance, which is my thick bar day. I'll do like a one-handed rolling lift, like a submax, you know, and then I'll do the axle bar afterwards.
Okay, I got you. And like I said, I don't want to like grill you on everything you do for training. Like I said, if you want to offer it up or go down that route, that's cool. But um, do you ever mess with any timed holds or anything like that, or mostly kind of the dynamic, kind of like the wrist curl, you know, stuff like that, or anything
Well,
where static holds are involved or time under tension stuff?
somewhat,
Yeah.
somewhat. Like I've done for the last Arnold, I was doing 1 set of 10, 2 set of 10 with regular like double overhand grip on the axle and the Saxon. So I would do it on Monday and then the Saxon on Wednesday. And then on Friday, I had my gripper still, and then I would do the hilt for a set of 10 and 2 sets of 10 afterwards. So but you know, I mean, I had to build up that work capacity for that.
Yeah.
Normally people just jump into that, they would get hurt pretty quick. But yeah, I mean, just doing that many reps, like just holding it and just doing that many reps in one set, I feel like that's enough time hold, I guess. So.
I got you. Yeah. Anything else under the, I guess the category of training you'd like to cover, or do you feel like that's probably pretty good? I think that's useful info for people so far. I mean, people probably enjoy kind of hearing that and kind of getting a look at how you kind of map some things out and probably add some of it to their own lifting, you know?
Yeah, I would say one other thing, more of a recent discovery was the gripper machine that I've been working with.
Yeah.
So I was trying to do the certification peaking block for grippers. Before that, I did a volume block and it went pretty well. I mean, I got like deep set reps where I would do 2 sets of 8, but on the second set of 8, it's not really capped at 8. It would be an AMRAP, so it's just as many as you can.
Mm-hmm.
But the first set is capped, and it's almost more of a warm up. Like not really, but the second set almost feels easier to do because you've done the first one. So it's like the feeling is more familiar and you get it in the right spot. So you kind of close it deeper and you just feel it better. And I did on the last week of that volume block, I did 2 sets of 8 plus with a 188 3.5. I did 8 reps on the first set, and then I did 11.5 on the second set.
Okay.
So, and that was like pretty big PR for me. I've never done that much before. But after that, I was trying to peak for grippers. So I would do my usual, like, you know, you warm up and then you get to a heavy single and then you back down and you do AMRAP sets with the credit card and the deep set and everything. But for some reason, I found that right after week 2, so on the third week, I was like overtrained almost. So I was just trying to do it, and I'm warming up and I'm like, oh, everything else just feels heavy, like just feels heavier than usual. And those of you who do grippers often will know the feeling of like, it's very neural. So like if you do an axle bar or a Saxon, rarely do you get that feeling of like, oh my God, this is so heavy. You know, you can't warm up and you feel okay because it's more of a muscle lift, you know.
Yeah.
Your CNS is not super important for that. But for grippers, your CNS plays a big factor. So you have to make sure that you feel good on the day you're doing your grippers. You have to make sure that you feel good, you feel fresh, and you have to make sure that you're like, you have enough energy to feel ready. Because if you don't want to do it, you're not going to do it. So it was, you know, I was trying to make it work. It didn't work out too well. So I just kind of said like, okay, I'm just going to put this aside for now and just going to take a little break off of it. Just mentally, psychologically kind of relaxed a little bit from that. And I just decided I'm just going to do some work on the gripper machine because it's still working your finger flexes. And honestly, to my surprise, it works even better than grippers because it's so much weight. And what's nice about it is if I have a spotter, I can set it just like a deep set. But the difference is the handles are thinner. So I have to actually close further to make them touch, which means that from the very first rep, even if I'm doing 20 reps in one set, from the very first set, I'm like, you know, like I can't relax because you have to make a tight fist with that. And you know, if you put enough weight on it, it really, really does a number on your finger flexors and like.
Well, it's almost like an increased range of motion, like kind of like a filed gripper, maybe, where you said you're having to go deeper.
Yeah,
you're kind of also
pretty much,
you're kind of training beyond the point of the handles touching technically.
Yeah,
as
like
well.
Beyond the range training stuff.
Yep,
yeah,
for sure. So that's another interesting thing. Yeah, I've been seeing some of those videos here from you probably in the last month or so, at least, where you'll have a spotter like lift up this whole stack of plates, and it's like, and then you're going to town, trying to crush it and do
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, man, no, it's been cool seeing it. So yeah, hopefully that training will keep paying off. And like I said, man, we'll keep seeing some big stuff out of you. I know we mentioned this earlier, and we kind of touched on, you know, maybe certain things where like, oh, we have 140-pound people, but you can see they're not putting effort in the set, so it's questionable. And basically like fraudsters out there that have, claimed certain feats, but then they've never been proven or backed it up. And then actually there's been several cases here recently where last few years, people have not only come under questioning, but they've pretty much been completely exposed, completely disproven, and then almost disappeared, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, the big thing I think about with that kind of stuff, and mainly gripper certifications and stuff, is it kind of turns other people off to trying it. I've seen several people say that they've lost interest in certain certs, or they've lost interest in pursuing certain things because there's a lack of integrity, or because certain people have kind of, you know, cheated or gotten away with it, or maybe they were found out later. But do you have any kind of opinion on that kind of stuff, or just anything you'd like to say on that subject in general? Because that's been a big hot topic for, I mean, several years, and maybe since the beginning of grip overall, but especially the last few years, there's been some pretty wild cases.
Yeah, definitely the people that say they're less interested in certifying on the grippers because of Tiziano and Dimitri, for instance. I think those people were more particularly angry at the judging, in particular of the company Iron Mind, that let those two people get certified on it. I think they were more upset with those people actually getting recognition and being certified for it, especially after one had been exposed so recently and the other one came out just after that, to not see some change in the judging and to see some change in, at least in some of the rules, it was quite upsetting for a lot of people.
Yeah. And that was the thing. Now, I don't think I saw this one, but there was something where people were talking about the Dimitri guy, where he closed like, I don't know how many grippers, but he said they were saying he closed like a GHP 9 or whatever. Basically, he just did like 4 or 5 big grippers that like you could pretty much only do like one of them, and he just like ran a gauntlet on all of them, and like it was nothing. I didn't see the video.
He had them in the back seat of his. He had it in the trunk of his car or something like that. He had like 4 grippers, and then he just like takes one out and he shows it, and of course it's like a blurry footage. You can't really see shit on it, so he just shows it, and then he just closes it and opens it, and then grabs the other one, closes it, opens it. I think to anyone who's done this for a while now, it looks ridiculous. Like, I don't know who. I'm surprised that anyone was actually falling for that stuff, because, like, if you are, slap yourself a little bit, not too hard, but you gotta wake up a little bit. Especially the first time it happened with Tiziano, that was quite an interesting thing. I remember.
Well, it's crazy. It's crazy too, man, that what sort of kind of brought it up was, or I don't say what brought it up, it was a topic for a bit, but what sort of kind of blew the case open was like a scale. It was like a scale issue. It's like, we're talking about gripper certifications that you're faking, but it was really kind of like a scale discrepancy that kind of really kind of peeled things open. But yeah, that was a pretty funny one. But like I said, I was always suspicious of that, because to set it that easy, I never could fully buy into that. The set always just looked funny to me. And well, obviously no resistance after that, but I'm saying even before we get to the close, set,
especially at that size, it's not really a thing. And I can speak from experience, because I have done mostly wide sets throughout the year. So I have not done deep sets. I never actually trained deep sets until like, past 4 or 5 months.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until then where I was like, oh my God, like, the thing is with deep setting is because the handle is pushed further up, you have better leverage to close it. But the key is if you can push it against and then set it down and then use your fingers to walk it, that's much harder to do while keeping that handle in place. So if it slides at all when you're doing it, or if I had this happen where it just rips the skin and then I can't hold it because suddenly there's nothing to grab onto. It's actually harder to set it that way than it would be to set it like normally with the handle back for a credit card position. Like when I set it for a credit card position, I can put the handle back slightly and I don't have to set that much. It's kind of like this because the handle's already back. So that means the front handle is closer to my fingers. So I can just set it a little bit and get it on. So if somebody was doing it that way, it would make more sense that the set looks easier. But if somebody's pushing it forward and trying to set like 220 like that, I was like, there's no shot. Like it's not possible.
Right.
Because I mean, you're seeing even with Carl, like even a 220 RGC. I mean, you're talking about a guy who closed 256 with 38 millimeter block set. Even a 220 RGC number 4 is not easy for him to set. Like he has to bring it down fully and then close it. So
yeah. And that's what's funny too, is because I think at one point, I don't necessarily remember the guy's last name for Dimitri. I just know the Dimitri stuff, but
yeah, Volagov.
okay. But when that was kind of coming under questioning and stuff, it was interesting because it was like, oh, well, he's going to be around this guy and then he's going to do this or that. And then it was like some picture gets posted and he's wearing like a hand brace or like, oh, I'm injured now. It's like, I don't know. It's like, how crazy is that whole deal? And it's like, I don't even know why anybody would kind of put themselves through all that. And yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was funny. Like I said, I didn't follow as closely as some people probably did, but I caught the gist of it,
Yeah, I was kind of doing more things behind the scenes with Dimitri and Tiziano. That I said some stuff on the grip board publicly, but there were a lot of things I was kind of doing in the background, trying to figure out what the hell is going on, because part of me was bothered by the fact that, especially at that time, like Tiziano got questioned when he first came out. Like, okay, September 2022, he messaged me on Instagram and he was talking to me about closing a number 3, how he wanted tips and coaching and stuff like that from me. So I just gave him some, like, I give people general advice, like do reps with this gripper before you go up to the next and stuff like that. Unless they give me really specific information, I can't really give them super specific advice. And plus, I don't really know the person. So I don't know their tolerance to this or that training. So I don't know how well they would respond to it. I just know how well I respond to it. And that's not really enough to give it to somebody else. So, and plus, grip sport is not huge to the point where we have a dedicated standard of training for everybody. So, I just gave him the general advice and everything, and suddenly he went from closing the number 3 with a deep set and struggling with it, and then he started sending in reps. So he did like 7 reps, and I'm like, okay. And then he sends a GHP 8, like 7 reps. I'm like, okay. And then he closes like a number 4, like 2 months later or something like that, like in October. And so, I mean, maybe that's, I think it was November, like early November 2022. And he posted on Gripboard, 201 RGC number 4 closed, 139 body weight. And immediately, if you look at it, like even now, you'll see right after he posted it, most of the people right underneath on the first page doubted his thing, like they thought he was faking immediately. But instinctually, people thought that this is some kind of bullshit. What upset me was the fact that the way that it was handled. So it was funny because he he wanted to kind of convince people that he was real, right? But the way that they went about it was Matt Cannon suggested that he has an engraving on one of the handles, a very distinct engraving that can only be like it cannot be like replicated kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so he has to open the package in front of the camera and then show the handle and show the engraving and everything, and then measure the distance of the spring and the handles and everything before and after closing. And after that, like he was suggesting that whole thing, and then Tiziano went and traded grippers with Carl at that same time, and then he posted it on the gripper. He's like, "Oh guys, I got a gripper from Carl, and I closed this. I almost closed this 209 RGC something." And then I'm like, "Oh no!" Like now people are just gonna like believe this because he's doing it with Carl's gripper, and I'm like, "No, this is not how it goes. You have to do it more like officially kind of thing, you know?"
Yeah.
And I mean, and that same gripper that he did attempt, he sent back to Carl, and I tried that same gripper when I was at Carl's in January, and I missed it by like a millimeter from a wide set. But I mean, there was nothing wrong with the gripper. There was literally nothing wrong. So he was just using fake tendons. And then he was in a Russian group chat that I happened to be in, and he was posting pictures of his heading grippers. And then late, it wasn't until after like January of 2024 where I was like, wait a second, these aren't even teddings. Like the stamps are all wrong. The spring looks too like glossy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he had like his buddy who was helping him rate RGC machines and was actually probably helping him with the fake grippers and stuff. So yeah, it's very weird stuff. It was just annoying to see like it go on for so long before he actually got exposed like officially.
Yeah. And one thing that I kind of made me laugh at one point, like I said, this is unrelated to the grippers, but there's like some of these companies that do basically like sort of remote leaderboards where you can just submit videos to them. And
Yeah.
I had messed around with a few of them, even though I'm mostly like I'm mostly like anti multi-venue competitions and stuff like that for that reason, because there's so much variance, and I like, in a perfect world, same day, same room kind of stuff. But I for participation reasons, some multi-venue, if run correctly, I think it's very effective and good. I think, like I said, the recent King Kong, perfect example of multi-venue and, probably being ran about as good as it can be. But yeah, some of those companies and different people would do these remote lists and leaderboards. And, just being new in grip, your first couple of years, you're like, oh man, I'm going to make all these lists. I'll just mess around if I get to, lift on something. And I also got skeptical of the dude's gripper closes when he was passing me up on other like leaderboard lists for like vertical lifts and other stuff. And it's not even lifts that I'm necessarily like known for, but in my head, I'm just like, how are you closing the grippers? The set doesn't even look like an effort. And then, oh, mysteriously now you're just like 20 pounds higher than me on the list. Like, where does that come from? So I started seeing his name pop up a little more. And I was just like, man, I got to the point where I'm like, I would just have to see it in person to believe it. And then that kind of pulled me back from a lot of those people just, hey, submit
Yeah.
us a video. And then we find out, like I said, with the scale stuff, it's like, oh God, like you're using, who knows what all went down with the grippers and everything, but like fake plates and everything else. Like
there's a good amount of evidence that me and a couple other guys have gathered. And we didn't really disclose it publicly because it's not really like enough evidence to really convince it, but the scale was, so they ran with the scale.
Yeah.
Because of that, because it was a good enough, it was convincing enough for people like, hey, there's something wrong here. But for it's that, and on top of that, with the barcode, of his Amazon package, which was hilarious. I remember laughing my ass off when I saw that. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember the barcode becoming a thing. Now, uh, I don't want to necessarily go, maybe we do, maybe we don't want to go into this too much, but for these people that are faking gripper things, I've heard of people, torching the spring and doing all this other stuff. Who knows? I mean, you name it, people probably tried it or done something with it. But is there really a way that you think that, like Dimitri or these other guys, like how are they making things look so similar? So like basically, how do they make it appear that way when they're really like just being fraudulent and just you know not able? They're not at that level of strength. But how are they making it appear that way in a way that becomes believable? And like we said, there's certain things that jump out that people were calling BS early on, but you think it would just be resolved quicker if it was that clear. How do they even make it look close to that? Like, and people talk about like swapping springs out. I've heard all kinds of stuff, but do you have any ideas about that, or do you think that possibly bringing that up could only enhance people that want to cheat's knowledge and maybe just don't even want to go down that rabbit hole?
Well, if a credible witness was a requirement for these things, it would not be such a problem, right? So if you had to do it in front of a judge, a certified judge, it wouldn't really matter how cool you were at video editing, all this stuff. You still got to do it in front of a judge. But in terms of how they make it look, I mean, a lot of times they have really, really poor quality in the videos, like you saw with Tiziano Dimitri. They film it in 1080p. When they upload it, it's like it's pixelated. Like you cannot see clearly the spring and the number and all this stuff. It all looks very grainy, and it's not like a good footage. And I think part of that is they're doing that to conceal some sort of damage that they've done to the grip, or whether it's heating the spring or swapping it. They wanted to do something to make it look less obvious, because if they block that out, then you cannot see the difference as much. So okay, this guy closes the 4 because I saw the number in this, but you can't exactly see it. So like when I film the gripper stuff, I always put the spring downward like this to show people like the spring itself, and underneath it into the handles there's nothing there, and you can tell the thickness of the spring from that. So, but him covering it, for example, with his thumb while holding it, it's very awkward behavior. Nobody holds a gripper that way, to hold the thumb in a position to hide the spring. And, I think just stuff like that, obviously not one thing at a time is particularly concerning, but if it's combined, then it means some sort of effort to deceive people. And I think that's what it is.
Yeah. And this, like I said, maybe still staying on the same subject a little bit with, I guess, them kind of being pulled off those lists in the way that they were, and, things kind of having to backtrack after evidence was brought forward. Do you feel like any of that kind of stuff is still going on right now? Is there anybody else that's sort of like in question, or do you feel like maybe with those situations kind of being resolved now that people are kind of we're not going to be seeing that behavior, or do you think it's going to kind of reemerge in just different forms and we got to stay on top of it?
Oh, it's not going to end. Definitely not going to end. There's going to be a lot more people like that. And the bigger the sport grows, of course, you're going to get more people that show up and they try to pull that stunts and everything.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, there's maybe like still 1 or 2 people out there that are doing some suspicious stuff. Obviously, you can't say that they're cheating exactly. I think you and I both know one of them. It's just like a little suspicious looking, the stuff they're lifting, how they're lifting it, the scale and all that stuff.
Okay.
But I mean, again, if they just did it in front of I don't know, if they just did it in front of a person, it would be much easier. But if they just do it at a contest, at least, like if you do something at a contest and then you go to your gym and you lift similar number, 10 pounds more, who's gonna You know, like who's going to have an issue with this? Like, okay, he did a 300-pound vertical bar at this contest, and he did 310 in training 6 months later. Like, that's not hard to believe, you know.
Yeah.
If he only did 310 in training and he never done it in competition, well, of course, you might be a little suspicious. Like, okay, is this the proper? Maybe this is really seasoned, you know, stuff like that. But
Yeah,
I
no, for
don't know.
sure.
I don't think. Yeah.
And the thing with also, like I said, if we stick to this similar subject with King Kong last year, there was the issue with the Russian venue, um, just like using
Yeah.
some sort of tacky resin, and it's like no lie. And I'm not necessarily trying to tell somebody how to cheat, but it's like if they had just not been so greedy and insane with the numbers that they submitted, they probably would have got away with it. No lie.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if they had just not tried to break every record by like 40 and 50 pounds, and there was three guys that all did it at the same venue, like
Yeah.
madness,
Yeah.
right? But even then, people were still like, oh man, just big numbers. Yeah, you know, hey, there's just strong people out there. And we're all like, hold on a minute. Like, no, like you
It
didn't just
doesn't
show
work
up
that
and
way.
break records by 50 pounds across the board, and like you and what you know the three strongest people in Russia, man. Like, come on. But and not to say that some of those guys aren't strong. It's just that they just got overzealous with the cheating, but that's really the only reason they truly got busted. Like, had they had more realistic numbers, probably wouldn't have really been requesting videos and everything else. And it might have actually set us back longer in the sport or really messed things up worse. But yeah, that's another thing that, like you said, that the
Yeah.
logical jumps or seeing the logical progressions usually helps. But yeah, when guys come out of nowhere and it's like, yeah, 60 pounds, and you're like, what? Like, who does that?
Yeah. One of the guys, he added like to his pinch block or something like 40 pounds or something, right?
Yes, it was something like that. Yeah.
Which is
And
in one year. I mean, adding 40 pounds, and it's not like the guy's brand new. I mean, this is somebody who's been training for years, and then
exactly.
suddenly adds 40 pounds. Like, it just does not happen, you
Yeah.
know, unless he like, unless he
And
was, you know, not trying or something. I don't know.
yeah, who knows? But yeah, for this year, I believe from when I spoke to Eric, it seemed like there weren't any of those same hangups. If video submission was requested, it was submitted. There was really no issues. Everything checked out. So I think this year's ran really smooth, and we didn't have to deal with any of that stuff. But yeah, that was a kind of a funny one last year, where it's like, man, like, yeah, you three guys all at the same venue, just you
Breaking
know,
records. Yeah.
yeah, breaking, yeah, not just breaking records, like shattering them. You know what I mean? Like, so it,
Yeah, they go to a track meet and they all beat Usain Bolt's record by
yeah,
like
right.
a fifth of a second.
It's just weird, man. But yeah, and I guess I I don't want to go down like a psychology route, but I get it. People just want the fame. Is there any real fame in any of this? Like they want the attention.
Definitely validation. They
Yeah,
definitely seek validation from
and
people. Otherwise, they wouldn't do such a thing. But
it's just such odd behavior, because it's like at the end of the day, when you lay down, it's like you didn't do it. You can't do it. So you feel better if other people think you can do it. It just sounds crazy.
yeah,
And
I think that's what it is. And you know, you'll notice a pattern with some of these people in the next, you know, as they come. Uh, you'll notice that if they get asked to show up somewhere, they won't say no. Like, they won't outright say no. They'll either come up with an excuse, or, you know, they just won't show up. You know, like with this Dimitri guy. And the thing is that even after he didn't show up, there were still some Russian people who were giving him the benefit of the doubt. And I'm like,
mhm.
hold on. He knew that this was the date of which he agreed ahead of time, 3 months ahead of time, to meet with Nikita and the rest of the people at the gym that gym that he goes to.
Yeah,
And, you know, to do this and not show up, there's nothing more that needs to be said. really, because
Yeah.
if you need an excuse after that, I mean, 3 months, that's crazy.
Definitely is. And when we're kind of dealing with these situations where they're suspicious, I know if we go by like regular law, it's like innocent until proven guilty, right? I personally think it should almost be flipped around for feats of grip. Like
Yeah,
now I'm not saying accuse everybody that they're frauds out the gate. No, not if they're known lifters and stuff. But what I'm saying is if somebody like Tiziano is setting a number 4 with no effort and he's just going right through, smashing the handles, and it looks effortless, the proof now rests on him. Like you have to prove
yeah.
that you're legit, and that's all I'm getting at with that. I don't mean we should accuse everyone of cheating out the gate. No, not everybody's
No,
guilty.
we have seen some people recently that kind of take it to the extreme where they just accuse anyone of cheating, and then it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and certain places like I know chess is having that problem right now. One of the former world champions, Vladimir Kramnik, is accusing a bunch of people of cheating, even though they aren't cheating. And then once in a while, he's right. So then he seems like he's like a prophet or something. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
he's just guessing out of 100 people. He gets one guy that's right. That's, it's a
Yeah.
statistic. So,
Yeah. I think my biggest thing with these things that can be suspicious or these high level things is that sort of like burden of proof just is on that individual. And it might be, hey, find a witness. Hey, show up to this comp. Hey, do something different. But it's like the thing I noticed with these situations we're mentioning is it really surprised me how many people bought into it and how many people kind of took that innocent until proven guilty approach. And I mean, almost to the point where they were defending it and telling everybody else they were like, hey, you need to quit looking into this. Like it's legit because he did this and
yeah,
this. And you're like,
that part was also
whoa.
bothering me a little bit.
Yeah. So in my mind, it's like, no, when you're doing world-class stuff and you start doing crazy shit and everybody's questioning it, now you have to, it's kind of like if you care enough about it to do all this, then it's up to you to sort of prove it, beyond a reasonable doubt, not necessarily like, oh, well, no one's caught me yet. So it's legit. Like,
Yeah.
man.
And also with like, for example, when people try to pawn off the argument of, oh, there's freaks out there. Yes, but okay, what's the most recent freak of nature you've seen try grip stuff, right? Iron Bibby?
Yeah, Bibby online. I would say Henry Mullet's a new guy from
Yeah.
Australia that's pulled some pretty cool stuff off. I mean, just out the gate. But yeah, I mean, they don't come around necessarily too often at that level.
But like, if I look at Iron Bibby, for instance, I'm not gonna question now how strong he is because he's
Yeah.
460 something and he has 28-inch arms and he has the world record log press. He has
Yeah.
the strongest shoulders in the world. It's like I'm not gonna, and the guy can do a cartwheel. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So chances are his grip is world class already. So it's stuff like that. It's like, okay, yeah, but that he's not unknown. You know what I mean? He's not like he
Yeah.
just came out of the woods looking like that, and then suddenly everybody was like, whoa.
Yeah.
It's just somebody who's been on the scene for a long, long time, and then just tried grip stuff with other legit people like Alexei Tukalov and Martins and Ode Haugen. So what they're doing is legit. So
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing. And some of these people they almost kind of come out of nowhere. Because I've seen this too. And that's why I'm kind of wondering about certain stuff because I've seen some people, whether they're tilting or level lifting inch bells, I see certain people lift bells, but I'm like, how is it that you just went straight to the biggest bell there ever was and there's no footage or anything of you lifting a lighter bell? That's weird. That's just weird to me.
yeah,
Like,
like he just goes straight to a Millennium style
yeah,
bell and just
yeah.
nothing else.
I just level lifted the Millennium first time I tried. I just keep doing it. Or it's like the equivalent of like just pulling the number 4 out of the package and just TNSing it. It's like, oh, that's just where you
Yeah.
started. Like, so I just find it funny when certain people, it's like, oh, there's no like inch lift video. There's no build up. There's no progression. There's no real like resume or track record.
Yeah,
And then
most
they
of us
just
have that.
and then they just
Yeah,
do the most like wild, outlandish lift, and you're just like, all the instincts are firing off that this is fake. But then again, I don't want to be that guy that's, talking shit to somebody if they're legit and
yeah,
they're really
nobody
that
does.
strong.
Yeah, yeah.
But like I said, that kind of like issue with them proving it, it's like, if we could just get a little more proof on some of that stuff, it
And the
would just
more
make
they
me,
delay it, the worse it is.
yeah,
Like the longer they hold on to this facade of trying to do it on the internet and they don't want to do it in person, the worse it gets because it just lasts longer, and then the longer it lasts, the more egregious their feats become. You know what I mean? Like at first is this, for example, T's Young. First is doing 3.5 certs. Like okay, but 3.5. Then it goes past that. So he goes from like 170 something, skips all the way to 200, and then 220. Within weeks. And then you're thinking, I remember thinking, just laughing inside. I'm like, why not just spread it out like evenly? Like if you're gonna do this, why not make it more believable to the extent of like, oh, I'm gonna take 3 years to achieve this instead of like 2 weeks.
yeah,
But they can't do it because it's an immediate
gratification.
satisfaction
Yeah,
thing. So
yeah,
it's an impulsive decision, and that's why it's so short. So when you see somebody reaching so far to
hmm
impress people with such a high number so quickly, that's really unattainable realistically. Then, of course, like you said, it just the red flags go up, and you're like, okay, well, this is, I'm not going to outright accuse you, but this
yeah.
looks
It's
like
kind of
bullshit.
yeah, exactly. And I would say with a lot of the examples we kind of covered and made mention of, I'm hoping that kind of like deters people from trying it, you know, because and I hope it kind of helped, I guess the community will say, um, maybe just have a better eye on, hey, don't fall for this stuff so quickly,
Yeah,
because I think that's another issue we have sometimes is you mentioned like, well, how many times does the random freak just show up, right? And it's like, but people like when that happens too. We just like when it's a legit lifter. But I think
yeah,
sometimes people fall for the trap of like wanting that next big feat or that next big person to come along. So they get a little gullible and they kind of ignore some of the red flags that we're speaking of. And then
yeah.
they go to
It becomes
almost defending
emotional.
it. Yeah. They because it's like, no, man, I kind of believe this guy. And it's like, well, okay, but I mean, it's almost like they want to believe it was possible. Like I think people wanted to believe that some of that stuff was happening and it was real, and it
For
was
sure,
like,
for sure.
you
Yeah, they
know,
they
yeah,
definitely did. Yeah, and it was, when you want something to be true, even though it's not, it clouds your judgment. And
mhm,
so what happens is, I mean, that's fine. If somebody personally believes that, but if you use that as the reason for why other people should back off of this guy, I don't think that's
yeah,
a good argument to make, because it's
yeah,
like that's your own personal issue that you have. You should
yeah,
not be involving that within the discussion about whether or not this individual is cheating, because he people are in the right to accuse him or even to suspect him, of cheating. So yeah.
yeah. I like I said, hopefully those examples that kind of developed here in the last year or two, uh, hopefully it's sort of kind of made people more aware. Obviously, kind of learn what to look for. Don't be so gullible. Don't necessarily look for the next, big savior to come out and do some crazy feat or something. Just and I think it might help prevent some things like that in the future. Hopefully, in my opinion, because like you said, there probably will be more, but I just think that becomes a harder battle to fight the more educated people become and the more they start realizing, like, okay, we've seen this before. Okay, we know how to
Yeah.
handle this now. We can kind of, kill this stuff early on so that it doesn't get, you know, dragged out as long as these other cases did. And
Hmm.
I think that's probably the thing that all of us would really enjoy seeing, or the main goal that we're all kind of looking at as far as keeping integrity. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's what I was trying to go for in the beginning. I was trying to just explain to people just the science behind it, like the size of the size of the individual, the size of their forearms will match to a good extent. The attachments of their muscle bellies, the stiffness of their tendons, how much neural drive they have. All this stuff plays a role in, how strong you are. But if somebody is so extremely small, or if somebody is so extremely new to something and they're not world class at anything else, it's just not physically possible. Because when you have that situation, for instance, like 140 pounds, when you're 140 pounds, okay, for instance, there's a light guy from Greece who closed, I believe, a 350 heavy grips or something like that, and he can credit card set a light number 3, and he's repped the numbers 3 in the 150s range from like a parallel set or whatever at 145, 150-ish body weight.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very, very strong. And he's recently doing some thick bar lift, for instance, and he's pulling like 70 kilos with blue fat grip or something like that. So the strength matches up, the numbers match up,
Mm-hmm.
and if you look at his form, it looks pretty freaky for that size. So everything matches up, it makes sense. But it's never that extreme, like I'm one of the strongest pound for pound grippers, but it's not like I'm all of a sudden just going to do like way more than Carl, because I would have to get very similar to him in terms of the size of the muscles and everything in the form, which is very difficult to achieve because he's so much bigger and heavier. So it's, at some point, people need to understand the science behind it, and then they can think more logically about it. Because if you just try to look at these situations and justify it scientifically, it just makes no sense. It's like, how is it even possible physically that somebody can do this so fast, let alone, but of course, like you said, it's just mostly emotional responses or personal beliefs and arguments that were brought forward.
Yeah. And that was the reason earlier in the interview that I kind of mentioned why I kind of always, we started around the same time doing some of this stuff and kind of found it around the same time roughly. And that's why I said, knowing your name and seeing you around, it was always cool that you were legit out the gate. That's why I mentioned, you were just authentic. But like I said, there's nobody running around saying that you're a fraud, you're a fake or any of that. Why? Because you did easy stuff. Like you did the easy thing. Like just show up in person, just be real, just be honest. And like, then you don't have to worry about that. So usually, I would say there's very few people that are that level, that legit. And there's just mobs of people saying they're frauds. If they're really out there, like, oh, if they're competing, like we talked about, if you can see the numbers and you see the proof, no one's still out there trying to fight that fight. It just kills it. And usually when you start seeing that many people accuse somebody, maybe it needs some attention, because if they had already proved and killed that stuff early on, it would never get to that point. So I think if it even gets to that point, it's a problem, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, like I said, I think we probably touched on that pretty good. And I think most people would like to, hear your take on that as somebody that hasn't engaged in that behavior and has done it the right way. So I think it always carries more weight from an elite, gripper, closer, just an elite grip person like yourself. And, and bringing the science into it, the facts, the math, different stuff like that it's not just about, what you believe and getting on a message board and, going crazy. It's, but like I said, it's always nice having experienced people that, are in the field, kind of in the trenches doing the stuff. And, they know, because like I said, you walk the walk. So, makes it a little easier. But yeah, like I said, we definitely,
also,
keep going. Yeah.
So it's also why I wanted to do a video with Larry Wheels a couple of years back.
Okay.
It's kind of a funny story. I ran into him in Barcelona. Me and him were going in the same places at the same time for vacation. in the summer.
Mhm.
So this one morning around 11 a.m. or something like that, I went to some beach area in Barcelona, kind of towards the edge of the city, and I wanted to have some breakfast, and they had like a little cafe, and they had pancakes and stuff like that with crepes. And I was with my mom, and all of a sudden I just see Larry with his girlfriend at the time, and we're just walking by, and I'm like, you know, I was like, no
Yeah.
way, right past. But then I waited for him. I was like, I feel like this is Larry. You know, sometimes you don't see a person in real life, and you're like questioning if it's actually that person or not. But then I was
Yeah.
like, this guy's too
Yeah.
big to not be Larry. And I greeted him, and I was like, hey, I'd like to do a video with you if you can. And he was like, sure. And we agreed to do it in Serbia because he was going back to Serbia because his girlfriend's from there as well.
Mhm.
And we met at some gym in Belgrade, and we filmed the stuff, and it was pretty cool. But I kind of like doing it, especially in front of him, because he knows about grippers. He's done enough videos with them to know if it's like real or fake and stuff like that. And he's had, Colin and Vitali and all these guys, monster guys, try these grippers out, and it was just fun. So
Yeah, and that reaches a major audience too, or bigger than like if we probably just posted it on our personal page or something.
for sure,
And then, like I said, it just shows the legitimacy of the feat to a bigger audience. And then, okay, yeah, nobody's running around saying, "Oh, I don't know, there's still something weird about that." It's like, no, right? Um, I just wish other people would maybe have taken that route, or if they choose to get into the stuff, I don't know. Hopefully they just kind of stay true and kind of see it that way,
yeah.
versus,
And
who
and
knows?
I think
Yeah.
me and you share a similar kind of philosophy with Adam Glass, where it's like sometimes you want to do feats where it makes it look effortless, where you want to make it look
Yeah.
easy, so that
Yeah.
people are kind of like, whoa, like that almost
Yeah.
looks fake, but it's not. So
Yeah. Like you mentioned, man, it's kind of like a magic trick. Like,
yeah,
and it's that same way. Like I've had friends come over, because I got a bunch of like inch dumbbells. I'll have friends come over, and sometimes it's like, oh man, they're breaking the 125-pound bell that much off the ground, and it's not moving. And then you just walk over to the inch and just like, boom, just lift it, and you're like, what?
yeah,
Like what? It's like it almost hits them, and it's almost like, yeah, it looks fake, but it's like, no, it's just the training. But it is fun because, like I said, it is almost like a trick, but you're not doing anything deceiving. You're just doing the real feat. You've just attained a level of strength or training that allows you to do that, and it's not necessarily normal for most people, you know. Um,
yeah. I,
but
I
yeah,
was like 17 in high school. I bought a number two for the whole day, and I was just showing it to kids, and the kids were like really interested in it because they were like, "Cool, it's like one of those grippers," and they always like pick it up and they think it's like one of those grippers that you can just like close for stress,
yeah.
like a stress gripper or whatever. And they would always grab it like, "I can't close this," and they would use both hands and stuff like this.
Hmm.
It was just funny. It's really funny because they would ask me like, "Can you close it?" I'm like, "Yeah," and they're like, "No, just give it to me right away and just close
Yeah.
it." And they're like, "Whoa." And they're always more fascinated with that because if you can do something without trying as hard, that somebody is trying significantly hard and they can't even budget, and it looks it's more of a trick for them. Like
Yeah.
somebody
And
bending
yeah.
a nail that's not particularly heavy for expert nail benders, but it's really heavy for average person. It's going to bring more of an effect in terms of showing than if you show them a gold nail bend and you like grind it right through it, and they'll be like, well, I don't know how hard this is because I can't even do a 60D.
Yeah, exactly. They almost have no scale or reference for it.
Yeah.
So and that kind of adds to, I guess, almost, not that any of us are necessarily like performing like shows or anything, but like
Yeah.
it is kind of that performance aspect of it. The easier you can do that hard thing, it makes it just seem cooler or a little more, impressive. Do you just want to kind of let people know where to check out your training, where to find you, just basic information regarding your stuff.
Yeah, I have a YouTube and an Instagram. It's pretty much where I put all of my training stuff. Most of my sessions are not like fully recorded, but I take little snippets and stuff. I sometimes will post stuff on the grip board on my own training log, but that's about it. So,
Okay. I was gonna say, did you want to? Do you have like a specific? Is it just your name on those channels? Is that the best way to find
yeah,
it?
I think if you just look up my name, my first and last name, and Instagram or YouTube, you'll just find it right away because
Okay.
it's not really a common name. So,
Okay. Yeah, man. Like I said, I just want to make sure people, if they, most of the grip world's already familiar with you, I would say, if new people or anybody else outside see this and aren't familiar and want to check your stuff out, just wanted to make sure that they knew where to go and how to check that stuff out. So, hey, man, it's been great. Like I said, getting the show done and doing this with you, and I look forward to having some more discussions in the future because, like I said, you're one of the strongest people we have in the sport, but you also are somebody with, like I said, good integrity, and you also have a good like training mind as far as analyzing the science behind everything and really putting a lot of attention to detail with that stuff. So, yeah, I would love to have you on the show again in the future sometime. And for now, yeah, thanks for taking the time and doing the show, man.
thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem. And like I said, man, best of luck in future competitions, and we'll see you, like I said, sometime in the future on the show.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.